let's get into the first and most important game on the SEC slate. Just kidding. That would actually be if we're being if we're talking about this in terms of like time. There's games Thursday and Friday, but the game that people will be getting up to see is Georgia and Clemson in Atlanta. Georgia, number one in the country. You might have heard Clemson at 14. Georgia's a 13.5-point favorite as of this recording. By the way, we're recording this on Tuesday afternoon, so that is earlier than we typically do the preview pods. We typically record these on Wednesday during the season, so there's a lot of injury stuff like that could be sorted out, things that we're going to hear about a little bit later on, including this one that is probably going to be of note on Saturday, not so much an injury, but a suspension. The over-under I have, Will, is 0.5 snaps played for Trevor Etienne. That's, look, in case you haven't seen, there's a lot of uncertainty about his status for Saturday after the DUI arrest that he had back in March. If he had been convicted of DUI, he wouldn't be playing in this per the Georgia bylaws. Yes, those do exist. Don't make a joke at that. But the waters kind of been muddied a bit because they had a plea agreement, basically dropped the DUI charge. He pleaded no contest to reckless driving, pleaded guilty to underage possession of alcohol, all that stuff. Kirby's keeping this close to the vest because that's usually what he does with suspensions. So this isn't necessarily new. We know what this game means to the Etienne family. Mm-hmm. I do wonder how much Kirby is factoring that in with this. And I also wonder how much Kirby is weighing the fact that Roderick Robinson is banged up. He's got a toe injury. He's not going to be playing in this one. Backfield depth is limited, which doesn't feel like something we often say with Georgia. I realize we were talking about this last year, but historically speaking, Georgia backfield depth is never really much of a concern. Could be a concern in this one. Without Etienne, without Roderick Robinson, if that's the case, that would mean Branson Robinson, the guy whose muscles look CGI, I think is fair to say. Missed all of last season.
Two of them? There's a Roderick Robinson and a
Branson Robinson and a Roderick Robinson.
Okay, got it.
Yes. Confusing, I realize. Very, very.
Because those both sound like superheroes. Like it's not like there's like a Steve.
Yeah, it's like Shamar Turner and Shamar Stewart. There's like three Shamars right now on the defensive line in the SEC. Yeah, it's very confusing to keep all this straight. But look, if this ends up being a Branson Robinson game, now I'm struggling. Look what you did.
That's your buddy, right?
Yeah, I know, anyway. Right? Yeah, my best friend Bronson. That's what I'm talking about. Look, Carson Beck mentioned this is someone who, yes, he missed last year, but the last time he was on the field for Georgia, had 2 touchdowns in that national championship game against TCU, albeit one that got out of hand in a hurry. But either way, I would expect that Branson Robinson is going to have a big role in this game, probably going to have a big role this season. Talked about before how don't think Trevor Etienne is going to be the SEC's leading rusher just because I don't think that's typically how Kirby uses his backs. And so they're going to try and dip into the well a little bit. Probably wouldn't be the best look to play Trevor Etienne after the offseason or two that's been for Kirby. I don't know. If I'm Kirby, I'm probably looking at it a little bit differently than he might end up looking at it. I don't know. But here's maybe the better question, Will. And this is why I brought this up. Does Georgia need Trevor Etienne to beat Clemson? Because I don't think they do. Like, let's be honest here.
Put Oscar Delp back there.
Seriously, put one of your tight ends back there just in pass pro and let Carson Beck throw it 40 times, and then shoot, give Dylan Bell carries. I don't care. Like
Dylan Bell. Yeah.
What was that?
That's my Southern football coach voice. He is like an all-time. I can imagine like Coach Niblett at Hoover yelling his name. Hey, get over here, Dylan Bell.
I was almost like Jeremy Pruitt Hoover.
Yep, exactly.
That was real thick. I like that. Like I think if Georgia came out with a really pass-heavy game plan and just decided, you know what, Branson Robinson, you got a lot of tread on those tires. We're going to get you involved. We're going to get freshman Nate Frazier. We're going to get the aforementioned Dylan Bell involved in here. I think they'd be just fine. Why do we think that at this point? Because why in the world would we have confidence that Clemson can score against Georgia? Seriously. I mean, last year was so bad offensively, and I was going back into the numbers today and realizing how many of these major categories that they weren't even top half in the country. I mean, it was terrible. Like, they couldn't get any chunk plays going. The Garrett Riley experiment, I think everybody agreed, like, didn't work out year one. But it would be blind faith to say Garrett Riley is going to all of a sudden flip the switch and it's going to be that much better. Yes, Cade Klubnik, full offseason in the offense. Like I get these cliche things that we talk about, but this isn't going against Georgia Tech here, with all due respect to the 1-0 Yellow Jackets. This is going against Georgia, all right? This is going against the defense that's finished top 5 in the country each of the last 3 seasons with arguably the best defensive mind in the sport, Kirby Smart. Mm-hmm. Speaking of that national title game a couple of years ago, and speaking of Garrett Riley, how did it work out last time he went up against Kirby? Because there's a certain 65-7
wings.
Yeah. And that was when he was at the peak of his powers. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like that was when he was feeling it as TCU's offensive coordinator. I'm not saying we're expecting 65-7. Okay. Garrett Riley, probably better talent to be able to work with on the field with this Clemson team, as crazy as that sounds compared to that national runner-up TCU team. Although they had some dudes. I mean, Kendre Miller, Quentin Johnson, like they had some dudes on that TCU team. Max Duggan, great college quarterback. But I am saying I expect something a whole lot closer to Georgia's 2022 opener against Oregon than I am the 2021 opener against Clemson. Okay. Isn't it wild to think about that change 3 years ago? That was probably the first game that we did as a preview game on this podcast together. And I predicted Clemson to win that game. I went back and looked at my crystal ball, like my prediction for that game. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I think DJ Uyunglele is going to get going. I think Justin Ross.
He had a touchdown pass.
Yes, he did. Technically, he had the only touchdown pass in that game.
Not to his own team, but he scored. He threw a ball that was running to the end zone for a touchdown.
Gosh, Dabo he was like, kind of had a little bit of a shot at Justin Ross for not necessarily cutting off the route the way that he was supposed to. Like he said after the game that Ross was supposed to like break off the route, and instead he just kept running a slant, and essentially that's why that play happened. And you kind of look back at that and you're like, is he just trying to look after DJ? Is he trying to like get his guy some confidence there? But yeah, a huge play in that game, in a 10-3 game. That was the pivotal play. And who knows, like if that doesn't go Georgia's way, like I don't want to say it changes the entire trajectory of the 3 years that these programs have had, but man, like it's just so bizarre to see how opposite of directions they've gone. Clemson at the time, 6 consecutive playoff berths, 6 consecutive ACC championships. They're playing in the building where they win all those ACC championships. That place for Clemson was like what Atlanta is for Alabama, right? Like they own that place. And then to think that Georgia has that moment and runs away with that barn burner of a game, you know, Georgia obviously since then played in a couple of national championships, won a couple of national championships, and, you know, has more national championships in the last 3 years than Clemson has ACC titles. I mean, that's just crazy to think about. But yeah, the way that this game sets up is so different than what we were talking about 3 years ago. And Georgia, in my opinion, should be able to take advantage of all those weaknesses that Clemson's had. I think Georgia wins this going away. I don't think Clemson's pass catchers are all of a sudden going to flip the switch. So give me Georgia to win 38-10.
Yeah, the other day we were texting, and I, of course, texted you because I was seeing slander online. I'm not going to go to the publication, but, you know, it was one of these tired old takes of, well, the best 2 coaches in the sport are Dabo and Kirby. Obviously,
I like Chris Vanini. The exercise that he chose to do with tears, I hated his justification for it. We can call out people if they have wrong opinions. Like that's okay. Fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But I agree with you 100%.
Yes. And so he like trotted out the take, well, these guys have multiple national champions. They got to be the best 2 coaches in the sport. And like, here's the deal, man. If you're not cracking 30 in the ACC, you're just not going to be able to hang with like any top 10 coach in America. Like if you're struggling with Mario Cristobal, that's just not going to happen. And like, basically, let me tell you why. The great defensive coaches, a la, you know, Nick Saban, I feel like I can, it's going to be the times I can mention Nick Saban productively are just going to go down, right? But Kirby has taken that mantle for him where it's like, okay, yeah, I guess you hired Mike Bobo, but you still had an electric offense. You still had this multifaceted offense that was getting up and down the field. And when Kirby was winning national championships, they had a really nice, unique offense that powered them to that 65-7 mark that you were talking about in a title game, right? Where they're eating chicken wings on the sidelines. And I think that the style of just being doing the Les Miles, doing the old school like Mark Richt of like, okay, we're just gonna get all these athletes together. We're gonna not turn the ball over. We're gonna play defense. It just does not work anymore. And I think that like that puts Dabo at such a disadvantage because when you don't have this great generational quarterback, right, like your Trevor Lawrence who can make things happen, like make these NFL throws at the college level and hit these tight windows, you just can't hang with these elite teams who are going to have those athletes on defense and they're going to have a great offense. There is no offense optional anymore. Being defense optional is honestly better. And we were always, coached up and thought, okay, you got to have defense. You got to have defense. But I would rather have, last year's LSU team or a Lincoln Riley team that can at least go shot for shot with a team and make it interesting than have a team that's just kind of dead in the water the way that Clemson has been, because you see it with football. We just talked about one play completely changed that game with the pick six. I mean, you're sitting on one or two plays completely making or breaking your team when the other side of the equation is, we just had a guy fall down defense. All right, Jaden Daniels, get back out there and score another touchdown. And like, that's just so much easier to get over. So yeah, I think that I hate to say the game is as passed Dabo by because we love the Riley hire and we did at the time. Maybe it just is breaking those bad habits. But I mean, that was the thing that I even cautioned people about at the time was that the TCU offense was not pretty. It was not the Lincoln Riley offense, which I think people will just like, oh, we got Eli Manning. He must be Peyton Manning. No, completely different. And it's like this offense doesn't look like his brother's offense, Garrett Riley and Lincoln Riley. It's a hard hat offense that gets the job done, but it's not the one that's going to be wowing the recruits in the way that it had in the past. So yeah, I think that really puts them at a disadvantage, which is the craziest part of this too. To echo your point, is that we're looking here and going, Georgia with Mike Bobo is just eons ahead of Clemson and Dabo Swinney on offense.
Think about this, Will. Clemson and Dabo has maintained for some tier 1 status because why? Well, because he develops, and his floor is so unbelievably high. Dabo in the last 3 years has had 2 offensive players drafted, none of which were in the first 2 days of the NFL draft. One offensive lineman was a 5th rounder in 2023, and Will Shipley, a 4th-round running back that, if we're being 100% honest, did Will Shipley turn into the player that Clemson fans hoped he'd be in a post-Travis Etienne era? No. He didn't. And how much of that was the scheme? How much of that was the surroundings? Clemson not being able to find those guys that can stretch the field? I don't know. But he did not turn out to be that guy. And it's wild to think that they have gotten to this place. And we can see all of the reasons why they have gotten to this place. And I think you're going to look at the way that these two teams are built. And there will be moments on Saturday in which Georgia has a big play in the passing game. You'll be like, oh, who's that? Oh, it's Dom Lovett. Oh, that's over there. That's the tight end that they got from Stanford. Oh, wait, is that London Humphreys, the guy that got from Vandy? Oh, yeah. All of these guys that Georgia got from the portal.
Mm-hmm.
And Kirby, between the first 3 cycles of the portal, between 1 and 4 guys, he was so much closer to Dabo than Lane with the portal. It's not even funny.
Oh, yeah.
Like, he was the guy that said, we're going to still recruit at the high school level. We're not going to rely on the portal. Very, very seldom are we going to go after that guy. And they were always going to be, at a loss for that. And Kirby took 11 guys from the portal in this class. And now in the first year that you're without Brock Bowers, that you're without Ladd McConkey, you already had Robert Thomas kicked off the team. And obviously there are things that Georgia needs to figure out. So I'm not saying that this is a given, because there could be those moments this year in which they just don't have that guy that Carson Beck trusts when it's late game scenario and he needs to be able to move the chains. But they have set themselves up so much better than Clemson has to overcome the loss of legends. And it's like such a basic thing that we can probably talk about until we're blue in the face, but it's what allows you to keep this floor high. And Georgia's floor, if it's a 13-1 season, is just so much better than what we could have ever imagined 3 years ago when these teams were playing. It doesn't feel like it's a fair fight in this one. And it's going to be noteworthy if Clemson makes this a 60-minute game against Georgia.
Yeah, and I mean, it's crazy, too, when you think about these teams' path to being kind of a dynasty, right? Where it's like, with Dabo, it's like, dude, you will never have another challenger in the ACC. I mean, like, what Mike Norvell has done to come up just a little bit, you know what I'm saying, has completely knocked this guy off his rocker. Meanwhile, in the SEC, you got Texas, you got Oklahoma, you have the resurgent. We talk about Mizzou and Ole Miss ad nauseum. You got Brian Kelly at LSU. You got all these guys coming in and making the SEC better. And we're looking at Georgia going, And who should they be scared of? Texas? Heck no. You know, I mean,
Yeah.
Brian Kelly? Heck no. And with Dabo, it's like, man, again, we always joke about the weather needs to be perfect, 72 degrees. Like, that's what it's feeling like more and more for Dabo. In an ACC, it's like, okay, you guys added like half of SMU and some West Coast schools. Like, how are you not in control of this conference for the foreseeable future?
So let's do this then, because you're right. All those points are very fair, and I think everybody kind of realizes it. Even Clemson fans, whether they want to realize it or not, who might be holding on to this notion that Tyler from Spartanburg sparked a new era of Clemson football. TBD on that. Dab was no longer taking calls on his.
I was about to say, that's all you need to know is that he didn't want to take any more calls. He didn't want to hear what Tyler has to say.
Tyler was
Tyler was right.
Yeah, it was. So here's what we should do. Let's say that Clemson pulls off this upset, because that's what it would be. You're a 2-touchdown underdog. If Clemson pulls off the upset, all right, we're going to have different conversations about Clemson, probably having different conversations about Georgia. But if that doesn't happen, and if this is the status quo, and if Georgia wins this game going away, and it's not particularly close, let's just please stop putting Dabo in tier 1. Can we stop? Because you can say someone's the most accomplished coach, but when they're 6 years removed from winning a national championship, and they're just trying to win a New Year's Six Bowl for the first time in 4 years, why do we have these conversations? Why, like, what's the point of that exercise then? And I think Chris Vanini does phenomenal work, so I'm not trying to like call him out. I just didn't like that thinking, because I actually we were talking about this. Once you get into tier 2 with these coaches and stuff, it is very all over the place right now, and it feels like it's going to go in a bunch of different directions with the 12-team playoff. So I get the struggle with that, but Dabo's tier 2. Like Dabo's tier 2, Kirby's tier 1, and like that's. For me, that's about as black and white as it gets. And I usually try and find the nuance in these situations, but not with this one.
Yes, and I didn't even do a prediction. I think you're right on the money. I'd go 30-10, but I think 38 is probably more likely, honestly. But I just don't want to steal your answer. That sounds perfect.